I've always been the quiet one in the family, the one who stayed in the background, never drawing too much attention to myself. Growing up, I always felt like I was in my family's shadow, no matter how hard I tried. My father, a powerful business mogul, would look past me, as though I was invisible. My siblings, while not malicious, never truly noticed my efforts either. They cheered on one another, but I was the one left standing alone in the corners of the room, questioning if I had any value at all. But there was something they didn't know. Despite the constant rejection and dismissal, I had been building my own empire, quietly, secretly, without anyone's help or approval. I went to MIT, graduated at the top of my class, and had built a $200 million company from scratch. It was all for me, for the future I wanted, the one they never thought I could achieve. Thanksgiving had always been a tense affair in our family, a gathering that, instead of bringing us closer, always seemed to highlight the invisible wall between me and my family. They would sit around the table, laughing, telling stories, while I tried to find my place, always feeling like an outsider. This year, though, I was prepared. I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this holiday pass like the others. I was finally going to confront my father. I was going to demand the respect and acknowledgement I'd earned, whether he liked it or not. We were seated around the large dining table, the aromas of turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air. My father, who always sat at the head of the table, suddenly cleared his throat. The chatter quieted, and his cold, calculating gaze swept over the room. He was about to say something, but I couldn't have predicted what would come next. "I've made a decision," my father began, his voice carrying an unusual weight. "I'm selling the company." The room went silent. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The company, the one I had worked so hard to build, the one that had been the centre of my life for as long as I could remember, was being sold? My mind raced. He had never mentioned this before. Why now? And what about me? I had sacrificed so much for this company. How could he just throw it away? I stood up, trying to steady myself. My siblings, who had been uncharacteristically quiet until then, exchanged glances and started to nod in agreement. They didn't seem surprised. It was as if they had expected this from the start. "Who bought it?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "KCL Holding," my father said, his voice filled with pride. "They offered us $70 million. My blood ran cold. KCL Holding was one of the biggest players in the industry. And $70 million? It was an insult. The company was worth so much more. A sudden realisation hit me. I wasn't going to sit there and let them belittle me any longer. I wasn't going to be that invisible, dismissed daughter. I had worked too hard for too long. With a sharp breath, I smiled, almost mockingly. And then I said something I never thought I would say. "I'm KCL Holding," I said, laughing as I stood tall. The room fell silent. My father's face twisted in confusion, and my siblings looked at me like I had lost my mind. "You're KCL Holding?" my father asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," I said, my smile never wavering. "I'm the one who bought the company. I paid you $70 million. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence in the room was suffocating. My father's face turned bright red, and my siblings were still in shock. I turned to leave, knowing that this moment would change everything. As I reached for the door handle, I paused and turned back to face my father. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice steady with resolve. And with that, I walked out, leaving behind a family that had no idea what was coming next. I had always felt like the invisible one in the family, The quiet, unremarkable daughter, sitting at the edges of every conversation, never quite fitting in. My siblings were always in the spotlight, the ones who had my father's attention, while I was left in the background, trying to earn approval that would never come. Growing up, I worked hard to prove myself. I excelled at school, earned my spot at MIT, but I didn't let that stop me. No matter how much they ignored me, I kept pushing forward, doing my best to make a name for myself. I'd sacrificed my time, my energy, and even my personal life to try to contribute to the family business, the one my father had built from the ground up. But every time I tried to show my worth, it was as if I was invisible. They never saw me. This Thanksgiving was no different. At least, that's what I had thought. I had spent so many years silently hoping that this would be the year my father would finally notice me. Maybe this year he would see how much I'd sacrificed. Maybe he would finally understand the lengths I'd gone to for the family to keep everything running smoothly. But instead, he had made his announcement, the one that shattered every last ounce of hope I had left. "We're selling the company," he had said, coldly, matter-of-factly. And when I asked about the deal, he had told me, "You're getting nothing." The sting of those words still echoed in my mind as I sat in my car, staring blankly at the road ahead. How could he do this? How could he disregard me so completely after everything I had done, everything I had sacrificed? It was more than I could bear. But then, as I thought back over my life, I realised something that I hadn't fully understood until now. I had spent so many years trying to earn their love and approval. I had given everything I had for the family, and for what? To be told that I was worthless? To be ignored and treated like I didn't matter? No more. I wasn't going to let them dismiss me anymore. I had spent countless hours working in silence, building my own empire without their knowledge. I had founded my own company, a successful one at that. They had no idea what I had been doing behind the scenes, working day and night to create something far greater than they could ever imagine. They had never seen me as capable, but I was. And now, I was about to make them see that. As I walked back into my apartment that night, I felt a surge of determination I hadn't felt in years. The betrayal stung, but it also fueled me. I wasn't just going to sit there and let them destroy everything I had worked for. I couldn't help but smile as I sat down at the desk in the sleek, modern office. This was my victory. This was my moment. But deep down, I knew the real battle was just beginning. My father would never let me go that easily. My siblings wouldn't understand. They'd never see me as anything more than the invisible daughter they'd always dismissed. But I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I sat at my desk in the modern office building that now represented my future, staring out the large glass windows. The city sprawled beneath me, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling. For as long as I could remember, I had been fighting for a seat at the table, trying to make my family see that I was worthy. But now the tables had turned. I wasn't just at the table anymore. I owned the damn thing. The business I had quietly built was now worth $200 million. That didn't happen overnight. I'd sacrificed so much to get here, countless sleepless nights, years of planning, grinding away at every detail, learning everything I could about the market and pushing through moments of doubt. No one knew any of this. I kept it a secret from my family, knowing that if they ever found out, they would only try to tear me down even further. I had made the decision a long time ago to build something on my own, away from their expectations and limitations. I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, without their help, without their approval. I'd started small, with just a handful of employees, and slowly expanded, building a company that thrived in the shadows, while my family and their business soaked up the spotlight. But now everything had changed. My father's announcement had thrown everything into turmoil. KCL Holding, the company that had bought out our family business, had paid a fraction of what it was actually worth. It wasn't just a bad deal, it was a betrayal, and I couldn't let that go. I took a deep breath, sitting up straighter in my chair. I had a decision to make. If I was going to confront my father and my siblings, I had to be prepared. It wasn't enough to just own the company now. I had to prove that I was the one who deserved it. It wasn't about the money. It was about respect.
I'd spent years working in their shadow, and now it was time to step into the light. I quickly called my lawyer, requesting the details of the buyout and any legal stipulations surrounding it. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. But as I picked up the phone, a thought struck me. What if my father knew I was the one behind KCL Holding? What if he suspected something all along? The thought made my stomach churn. I had worked so hard to keep everything hidden, and yet here I was, sitting in the very company my father had just sold. What would he say if he found out? Would he respect me? Or would he dismiss everything I had done as some fluke? The phone rang and I pushed the thought aside. I needed to focus. There were bigger things to deal with. I met with my lawyer a few hours later. He was a seasoned professional, used to handling complex corporate mergers and acquisitions. We discussed the terms of the sale and what it would mean for my involvement in KCL Holding. The more I learned, the clearer it became. I wasn't just a shareholder. I had leverage. I had the power to take control, to turn this company into something far bigger than anyone ever imagined. I smiled to myself as the lawyer continued speaking, but I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling at the back of my mind. My father's words from Thanksgiving still echoed in my head. You're getting nothing. But I wasn't getting nothing. I had everything now. And I wasn't about to let anyone, not even my own family, take that away from me. As I left the lawyer's office, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before pulling it out. The message on the screen was from my oldest brother, Daniel. It read, "We need to talk. Please, come home." Home. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. Home had never felt like home to me. It was always a place of expectations, judgment, and rejection. But now things were different. I wasn't the person who had been left behind anymore. I was the one in control. I stared at the message for a long moment before replying with a simple, "I'll be there." But this time, I wasn't going back as the daughter who had been pushed aside. I was going back as the woman who had built an empire of her own. And this time, they would see me for who I truly was. When I walked into the house, the same old smell of turkey and stuffing filled the air. Only this time, it felt different. The familiar setting, the grand dining table, the portraits of my ancestors on the walls, the laughter of my siblings, was no longer comforting. It was suffocating. For years, I had lived in their shadow, hoping, praying that one day my father would recognise me, acknowledge my worth. Now I was standing in the heart of it all, but not as the ignored daughter. I wasn't going to be the one hiding in the background anymore.
As I stepped through the door, I immediately spotted my father in his usual spot at the head of the table, looking as imposing as ever. My siblings were scattered around, quietly talking, with the usual awkwardness that came with these gatherings. But this time, there was no joy in their faces. The weight of the sale hung in the air like a dark cloud. "You're here," my father said flatly, looking up at me from his seat. "I got your message," I replied, my voice steady. "We need to talk." He nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Come, sit down. We've got to sort this out." I hesitated for a moment before walking to the chair opposite him. I sat down slowly, looking around at my siblings. They didn't meet my eyes. Typical. They were still too shocked by my announcement at Thanksgiving, still trying to process what had happened. "Let's just get to it," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I'm KCL Holding. I bought the company." A heavy silence fell over the room. My father looked at me with a mix of disbelief and anger, and my siblings exchanged confused glances. I could feel the tension rising, but I wasn't backing down. "You think you can just walk in here and make demands?" My father sneered, his voice laced with contempt. "You're still my daughter. You've got no right to think you're in charge now." I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locking with his. "I'm not just your daughter. I'm the one who owns the company now, whether you like it or not. You sold it, and I bought it. I didn't just inherit a name. I built something on my own." My father's face reddened. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is absurd. You can't just do this. You're not fit to run this company. You've never been fit. What do you even know about real business?" I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar sting of years of being dismissed, but I refused to let it show. I wasn't going to let him reduce me to nothing again. "I know a lot more than you think, Dad. More than you ever gave me credit for." My siblings shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. I could see the judgment in their eyes, the disbelief that I, the invisible daughter, had taken control. They had never taken me seriously, and I could see it in their faces now. But I wasn't here to win their approval. This was bigger than that. "You think you've earned my respect by buying a company?" My father spat. "You haven't earned anything. You've always been the outsider, always the one we had to tolerate because you were part of the family." His words hit harder than I expected, but they also lit a fire inside me. For years, I had worked myself to the bone for them. I had sacrificed my time, my energy, my dreams, all to keep the family business afloat. And now my father was telling me I hadn't earned anything. You never once saw me for who I really am," I said, my voice sharp. "I've spent my whole life proving myself to you, trying to earn your approval. I've worked harder than any of you, but you never cared. You never saw my potential. Well, now you're going to see it whether you like it or not." I stood up abruptly, feeling the weight of the moment. The room was thick with tension, my father's frown deepening, my siblings' discomfort growing. It was time to make my final point. "You've had your chance," I said. "You sold the company and now it's mine. I'm in control now, and you will respect that, whether you want to or not." My father took a deep breath, his anger momentarily fading into something else, something that looked like resignation. "I never thought you could do it," he muttered, almost to himself. "But this is too much. You're making a mistake." I shook my head, a calm, confident smile crossing my face. "No, Dad, I'm not making a mistake. You are. You always have been." The silence that followed was deafening. My father looked at me, his eyes full of conflicting emotions. My siblings remained silent, still processing the shock of it all. But I didn't care. I had done it. I had finally made my stand. I turned to leave, but my father's voice stopped me just as I reached the door. "You don't know what you're doing," he said quietly. I looked back over my shoulder. "Maybe not, but I'm done living in your shadow. And this time, I'm the one who gets to decide what happens next." The day after the confrontation, I sat in my office, trying to shake off the weight of what had happened. My father's words lingered in my mind. "You don't know what you're doing." It wasn't the first time he had underestimated me, and it wouldn't be the last. But now I was in control, and I wasn't about to let them, take that away from me. Just as I was beginning to breathe a little easier, my phone buzzed on the desk. I looked down and saw a message from Daniel, my oldest brother. "We need to talk. It's urgent." I rolled my eyes. Another attempt to make me feel guilty, no doubt. But I had to go. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about them seeing me as I really was. If I didn't show up, it would only give them more power over me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I arrived at the family estate, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt suffocating, like it was closing in on me. My father's empire had always been built on manipulation and control, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever trap they had set for me. When I walked into the living room, I saw my father sitting in his usual chair, looking as imposing as ever. My siblings were gathered around, and the tension in the room was palpable. No one spoke at first. They were waiting for me to say something, but I didn't want to be the first to break the silence. Daniel finally stood up and walked toward me, his expression serious. "We need to talk about what's going on," he said, his voice low. "You've crossed a line and you need to fix it." I raised an eyebrow. "Crossed a line? I'm sorry, but last I checked, I'm the one who now owns the company. If anyone has crossed a line, it's you guys." He shook his head, his face hardening. "You don't get it. You've made this personal, and now you're jeopardizing everything we've built as a family. You're throwing away years of hard work for what? A power play?" My stomach turned. "You think this is about power? I didn't do this to take control for the sake of control. I did this because I earned it. I worked for it. And I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter." But Daniel wasn't listening. "You may have earned the company, but you've lost your family in the process. You're destroying us and you don't even care. This isn't just about money, it's about us. You need to fix this or you'll lose everything, and I mean everything." I felt my pulse quicken. "What are you saying?" Before he could respond, my father spoke up, his voice cold and calculated. "He's right. You've overstepped and there will be consequences. We don't want to go to war with you, but we can't let you take everything we've worked for. If you don't give up control, we'll make sure the whole world knows what you've been hiding." My heart sank. "What are you talking about?" Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You think you've won? You think you can just walk in and take everything from us? We know your secret. We know what you've been doing all these years. The business you built? We can destroy it in an instant. One phone call and it's over." The air in the room felt thick, like I was suffocating. The blackmail was unmistakable. They were trying to manipulate me, using my past and my sacrifices as a weapon against me. I swallowed hard. "You're threatening me?" My father smirked. "It's not a threat, it's a promise. You can keep your company, but at what cost? If you want your family's respect back, you'll have to give up everything. Walk away from the business and we'll make sure no one finds out about your secret life." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. They were playing dirty now, pulling out all the stops to bring me back into line. But I wasn't going to let them win. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. "You think this is going to make me back down?" I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I don't care about your threats. I'm not giving up my company, and I'm not going to be your puppet anymore." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this. Trust me." I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, my mind racing. They thought they could break me with their threats, but I wasn't going to give in. I had come too far. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. The drive home was a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My father's cold threats echoed in my mind. It wasn't just a business dispute anymore. This had turned into a war for control, for power, for respect. They thought they could intimidate me into submission, but they underestimated me. I couldn't keep going like this. The blackmail, the manipulation, it was all too much. My heart was pounding as I pulled into the parking lot of my office. I had to think, and I had to think fast. I couldn't afford to lose everything I had worked for. But I wasn't alone. I remembered someone, a distant cousin, Rachel, who had always admired what I was doing. Rachel had never been like the rest of the family. She had always supported me, quietly, from the sidelines. We weren't close, but over the years we'd shared a few conversations about business, about what I was doing and about the dreams I had for the future. Unlike the rest of my family, she believed in me. I reached for my phone, dialing her number. "Hello?" Her voice came through the line, soft and calm, but I could hear the concern in her tone. "Rachel, I need your help," I said, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to sound strong. They're coming after me. They know about my company and now they're threatening me. I can't do this alone. There was a pause on the other end. I could feel her hesitation, as though she were unsure of what to say. But then she spoke, her voice steady. I'm listening. Tell me what's going on. I filled her in on everything. The confrontation with my father, the blackmail, their attempts to make me feel like I was nothing. As I spoke, I realised just how much I had been carrying alone. I had kept all of this hidden from everyone, trying to protect the family business, trying to protect myself. But now I needed help. I can't let them destroy everything, I said, my voice cracking.
I've worked too hard. I've sacrificed too much.
Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke, her words filled with certainty. You're not alone. I've been watching you. I know what you've built, and I believe in you. I'll help you take them down, but we need to be smart about this. We need to build a strategy, not just fight back recklessly. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel wasn't just offering sympathy, she was offering support. She believed in me and she had the skills to help me fight back. This was the ally I had needed. Thank you, I whispered, feeling the relief wash over me. We'll start by looking at everything we can leverage. The legal documents, the contracts, the sale. They won't know what hit them. Let's meet tomorrow and we'll go over the details. I nodded, my heart lighter than it had been in days. I'll see you tomorrow. After hanging up, I took a moment to breathe. I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone in my corner, and together we were going to turn this fight around. The next morning, Rachel and I met in the conference room. She came prepared with notes, legal documents, and ideas I hadn't even considered. She was sharp, focused, and ready to take on the fight I had been dreading. I couldn't help but admire her calm confidence. We're going to need to review everything. Every contract your father signed, every agreement. We'll find the cracks, the weaknesses in their position. And once we do, we'll strike, Rachel said, outlining our plan with precision. For the first time in days, I felt like I had a real chance to win. Rachel wasn't just helping me fight back. She was helping me fight smarter. As we worked through the legal details, I realised something important. I wasn't just fighting for control over the company. I was fighting for my freedom, for the respect I had always been denied, and for the future I had built on my own terms. But this battle wouldn't be easy. My family wasn't going to give up without a fight, and they were going to use every tool they had to try to tear me down. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had Rachel. I had the knowledge and the drive, and I had the one thing that mattered most: control of my future. The drive back from the family estate was torturous. My mind was spinning with the weight of my father's threats. I knew the battle I had just stepped into wasn't going to be easy. My father had a way of making everything feel like a war, and he wasn't one to back down. But I wasn't going to give in. I couldn't. Not this time. I pulled into the parking lot of my office building and turned off the engine. The moment I stepped out of the car, the cool air hit me, but it did little to shake the tension I felt inside. The sting of my family's betrayal still burned, but it also gave me a strange kind of clarity. This wasn't just about the company anymore. It was about me, about my fight for recognition, and about proving to everyone, including myself, that I was capable of more than they had ever believed. But I couldn't do it alone. I pulled my phone from my pocket and quickly dialed Rachel's number. She was a distant cousin, someone who had always quietly admired my work from afar. We weren't particularly close, but I knew she had always believed in me. If anyone could help me navigate the mess my family had created, it was her. The phone rang once, then twice, before she picked up. Hello? Rachel, I need your help, I said, my voice tight with emotion. They're coming after me. They know about my company and they're threatening to ruin everything I've built. I can't do this alone. I need someone I can trust. She paused for a moment. I could hear her thinking it through before she spoke, her tone warm but serious. Tell me everything. I didn't hold back. I told her about the confrontation, about my father's cold dismissal, and the blackmail that had followed. I explained how my family was using my past, everything I'd done in secret, to try to tear me down. I could feel the weight of my words as I spoke, the years of pent-up frustration, the endless striving for approval, and now the threat of losing everything I had worked so hard to build. Rachel listened carefully, never interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You've been holding this all in for so long, haven't you?" she said softly. "You've done all this by yourself, and now your family is trying to tear you down. But you don't have to do this alone anymore. You've got me. We'll figure this out together." I could feel the knot in my stomach loosening. Rachel's words were exactly what I needed to hear. She wasn't just offering sympathy, she was offering me a lifeline. She believed in me. She believed in what I had built, and that made all the difference. "Thank you," I whispered, feeling a flood of relief wash over me. "I don't know what to do, but I know I can't back down now." "We'll get to work," she said. "We'll look at everything, the legal documents, the sale contracts, the family history, whatever it takes. We're not going to let them take you down." The determination in her voice made me feel stronger. For the first time since that Thanksgiving dinner, I felt like I wasn't facing this battle alone. The next morning, Rachel and I met at my office. She came prepared, more prepared than I had expected. She had already gathered key documents, legal paperwork, and the details of the company's sale. It was clear that Rachel had the skills and the intellect to help me navigate the mess I was in. She wasn't just here as a supportive cousin. She was here as a business ally, and I needed that more than anything. "We're going to go over everything carefully," Rachel said as we sat down in the conference room. "We'll identify any weaknesses in their position. If we play our cards right, we'll have leverage and we'll turn the tables on them." As Rachel spoke, I felt a renewed sense of confidence. For so long, I had been afraid of my family's power, afraid that their influence would be too great for me to overcome. But with Rachel's help, I realised I had my own power. I had built this business from the ground up. I had put in the hard work. I wasn't just some weak, invisible daughter anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. "We'll need to move quickly," Rachel continued. "They'll try to make you feel small, like you're in over your head. But remember, you've already won. You just need to stand firm." I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over me. The battle wasn't over, but now I had the tools to fight back. With Rachel by my side, I knew we could take on whatever came our way. But as we worked through the legal documents, a notification pinged on my phone. I hesitated for a moment before checking it. It was a message from my father. "You will regret this. I won't stop until I've taken everything from you." The words sent a chill down my spine. He wasn't going to give up without a fight, but neither was I. I looked at Rachel, who was already scanning the documents on the table. "This just got personal," I said, my voice steady. Rachel didn't look up from her papers but nodded. "We're ready for whatever he throws at us." The next few days felt like a blur. I spent every waking moment going through documents, organising strategies, and working with Rachel to prepare for whatever my father was planning next. We knew he wouldn't just roll over quietly. He was calculating and ruthless, and we had to be ready for anything. But despite all the preparations, there was a part of me that still hoped, still longed for reconciliation. I had been fighting for so long, trying to prove my worth to my family, to my father, that I wanted it to be over. I didn't want to keep fighting. I wanted them to see me, to finally understand who I was and what I had built.
It was late one evening when I received a call from Daniel. The voice on the other end was unusually calm, almost too calm. "We need to meet," he said. "Dad wants to talk. He says it's time to settle this once and for all." I felt my heart sink. This was it, the moment I had been dreading and longing for, the chance to face my father again, to hear his terms, to see if there was any possibility of understanding between us. "I'm listening," I replied, my voice betraying the uncertainty I felt. "Come to the house," Daniel said. "It's a family thing. We'll figure this out." I agreed, though I knew I was walking into a delicate situation. I didn't know if I could trust my father, but I had to hear him out. Maybe, just maybe, he would finally admit that he had been wrong. Maybe this could be the beginning of the healing I had been desperately seeking for years. When I arrived at the family estate, the atmosphere was different. The large dining room, where we had spent so many Thanksgiving dinners, was now quiet, almost sombre. My father, as usual, sat at the head of the table. But this time, there was no arrogance in his posture. There was no pride in his eyes. He looked defeated. Daniel and my other siblings were there too, sitting around the table, avoiding eye contact. The tension in the room was palpable. But something had changed. My father wasn't the man he had been during the Thanksgiving dinner. He wasn't the man who had dismissed me, who had treated me like I didn't matter. "We've all been talking," my father began, his voice low, "and we've decided that we need to settle this. We need to come to an understanding." I sat down slowly, unsure of where this conversation was headed. My father had never been one for compromise, never one to admit that he was wrong. But this was different. There was an air of uncertainty about him that I hadn't seen before. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the child trying to prove herself to him. I felt like an equal. "We've made a mistake," my father continued, looking at me for the first time in what felt like forever. "I've made a mistake. I've always thought that you weren't cut out for this. But I see now that you've done something remarkable." I blinked in surprise. Was he actually admitting this? After everything? After years of dismissing me, he was finally acknowledging my achievements. I glanced at my siblings. They were silent, their eyes focused on their hands, as if they were unsure of how to react to this rare moment of humility from my father. "I'm sorry," my father said quietly. "I should have seen your potential a long time ago. I didn't realise that you could build something like this. You've proven me wrong." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My father, the man who had always belittled me, who had made me feel small for so long, was apologising. It was hard to believe. I wanted to accept his apology, to feel the relief that I'd been craving for years. But something inside me was hesitant. This wasn't just about words, it was about actions. "And what does this mean for the company?" I asked, my voice steady but cautious. My father paused, glancing around at my siblings. "We'll let you keep control, but there are conditions. We need to be involved. You can't do this alone." I raised an eyebrow. "Involved how?" "I'm not saying we want to take over," he explained, "but we've spent years building this company and we've got experience. We want to help guide you, offer support. You can't just shut us out." I felt a wave of frustration rise in my chest. "I don't need your support. I didn't ask for it. I built this company on my own. I don't owe you anything." My father's face softened and he nodded. "I understand. But we're family, and I don't want to lose you again. I don't want this to tear us apart." There was a long silence in the room. My siblings were watching, waiting to see what I would say. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, their expectations. But this time I wasn't going to let them dictate my choices. I don't want to tear us apart either, I said, my voice quieter now. But I've spent too long living in the shadows of this family. I've given everything for this company, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else take it from me. My father nodded again, a faint smile tugging at his lips. I get it, and I respect that. We'll find a way to work together, as long as you're willing to give us a chance. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each of my siblings. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the reunion I had imagined, but it was a start. The days after our family reconciliation meeting were strange. I wanted to believe that we were making progress, that things were starting to heal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my father and siblings were still holding on to something. Their sudden attempt at unity felt like a facade, a way to regain control of the situation without truly acknowledging the damage they had caused.
I didn't trust them, not fully.
Sure, my father had apologised and I had begrudgingly accepted it, but the real test was ahead of us. If I was going to move forward, I needed to ensure that my family wouldn't undermine me the second my back was turned. I had spent years proving myself, only to be ignored. I couldn't let that happen again. Rachel and I spent hours going through the paperwork, the contracts, and everything we could find about the company's sale. I knew the stakes were high. My father wasn't just going to let go of his legacy that easily. His pride and control ran deep, and the moment he felt like he was losing his grip, he would fight to get it back. And that was exactly what happened. It was a Thursday morning when I received the call from Rachel. Her voice was tight, urgency laced with concern. "They're trying to revoke the sale," she said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I've looked through the fine print, and it seems they're challenging your rights to the company." I froze, the air thick in my lungs. "What do you mean, challenging my rights?" "They're claiming that certain clauses in the buyout agreement were invalid," she explained. "They're trying to say that the terms of the deal were based on false information, that you had misrepresented your assets and the company's financial position." I couldn't believe it. They were going to drag this out in court? After everything, after my father's apology, they were going to try and take it all back? "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice shaky. Rachel paused before answering. "It's a messy situation, but it's real. They're going to fight this. I think they believe that if they can scare you, you'll just give up and hand the company back." The phone call ended, but the weight of her words stayed with me. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was a battle of wills. They were testing me, pushing me to see if I was truly ready to take control. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about proving my worth anymore. It was about my family's treatment of me over the years. They had dismissed me, belittled me, and now they thought they could take back what they had handed me with a snap of their fingers. I wasn't going to let that happen. I spent the next few hours pacing, replaying the conversation with Rachel in my head. They had crossed a line, and now I had to make sure they understood that I wasn't going to back down. I called a meeting with Rachel and a team of legal advisors, determined to turn this situation around. As I entered the conference room, my mind was racing. I had to make a decision whether I was going to fight back hard, using everything I had learned from the fight with my family, or whether I would let them walk all over me again. I could feel the weight of the decision on my shoulders, but I wasn't going to give in. I had worked too hard to let them take everything away from me now. The legal team set to work, preparing evidence and gathering data to counter my family's claims. We had one advantage. They underestimated my resolve. They thought they could just pressure me into submission, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. The legal battle had begun in earnest. I never imagined it would come to this, fighting my own family in a courtroom. But here I was, with my father and siblings on the opposite side, trying to tear down everything I had worked for. They were using their wealth, their influence, and their power to force me into submission. But they didn't realise one thing. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Every day I worked with Rachel and my legal team, meticulously preparing for what lay ahead. We gathered every shred of evidence we could find, examining contracts, emails, and financial reports. We had to make sure that every angle was covered,
Because if I was going to win this fight, it wouldn't just be about who had the most money. It would be about who could outsmart the other. I wasn't going to back down. I had spent too long being underestimated by my family. I had spent too long trying to earn their approval, only to have them dismiss me at every turn. But now I had something they didn't: control of the company, control of my future, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me. But as the days went on, the pressure started to build. The court dates were approaching fast, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing on my shoulders. The stakes were higher than ever. If I lost, I would lose everything: the company, my freedom, the respect I had fought so hard to gain. It would all be gone. One evening, as Rachel and I were reviewing the case documents, I received a call from Daniel. My stomach churned. After the way things had gone down at the family estate, I hadn't expected to hear from him.
I answered the phone cautiously.
"What is it, Daniel?" "We need to talk," he said. His voice calm, but there was something in his tone that made me uneasy. "I know things have gotten tense, but we need to figure out how to resolve this." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Resolve? You've been trying to take everything from me. You don't get to talk about resolving things now." "Just hear me out," he said. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm trying to help. Dad's willing to make a deal."
My heart skipped a beat. A deal? Was this some sort of trap? I had spent so long fighting for my place in the company, for their respect, and now they were offering a deal? It didn't feel right. "What kind of deal?" I asked, my voice steady but wary. "We're offering to let you keep the company," he said, "but there are conditions. You have to step down from being the sole decision maker. We want to be involved in the management. Dad wants to be involved. And we need to work together to take this company to the next level." I was silent for a moment, processing what he was saying. It was the same tactic they had used all my life. Offer me something, but make sure it came with strings attached. The strings were always there, and they were always meant to keep me under their control. This wasn't just about me running the company. It was about power, and they didn't want to give it up. "I've told you before, Daniel. I'm in control now. I don't need your help," I said, my voice unwavering. "I've done it on my own this far, and I'm not about to let you or anyone else take it from me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I get it. I'm not asking you to give up everything. I'm just asking you to consider the bigger picture. We're family, and we've always worked together. Don't throw that away just because of pride." Pride. That was the word that always seemed to come up when it came to my family. They wanted me to bend, to compromise, to put my ego aside. But for once, I wasn't going to let them define my worth. My pride wasn't what kept me going. It was my strength, my vision, and my refusal to be treated like I didn't matter. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said, my voice sharp. "But I won't let you or anyone else manipulate me into doing what you want. The company is mine now, and I'm going to run it on my terms. You either respect that or we'll go to court." Daniel's voice softened. "I'm not trying to manipulate you, but we need to make this work. We're not enemies, and we don't have to be." But I wasn't convinced. This wasn't about working together. It was about control. My father, Daniel, and the others didn't want to accept that I was capable on my own. They didn't want to see me succeed without their influence, without their approval. "I'll see you in court," I said coldly, ending the call before he could respond. As I sat back in my chair, my fingers trembling slightly, I realised something. This wasn't just a business dispute anymore. It was personal, and I was ready for the fight of my life. The days leading up to the court battle were a blur of activity. Each day, Rachel and I spent hours preparing, double-checking every document, every email,
and every detail we could find.
We knew this wasn't just about the company. It was about my family's attempts to strip away everything I had built. They had underestimated me, but now I was ready to show them that I wasn't going to back down. It wasn't just the legal fight that weighed heavily on me, it was the emotional toll. Every time I thought about what was happening, the months of dismissals, the years of sacrifices, I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me again. This wasn't just a business dispute. It was a battle for my identity, for my worth. And my family, the very people who were supposed to support me, were the ones trying to tear me down. The morning of the court hearing arrived and I felt a lump in my throat. This was the moment. The one I had been building toward for so long. I wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. I was fighting for my place in the world, for the respect I had been denied for so long. Rachel and I arrived at the courthouse early. She gave me a reassuring smile as we walked through the doors, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She was nervous too. This wasn't going to be easy. My father and siblings were already inside, and I knew they were gearing up for the fight of their lives. The way they had always looked at me, like I was the underdog, like I didn't belong, was gone. But in its place, there was something worse, the sense of betrayal. They still couldn't accept that I had outgrown them. We took our seats, and the courtroom filled with the murmur of voices. My father, as usual, sat at the front, his face a mask of controlled anger. My siblings were gathered around him, and for the first time, they didn't look confident. They were watching me, waiting for me to make my move. The proceedings began and the weight of it all settled in. My lawyer rose to present our case, and as I sat there, listening to the details unfold, I couldn't help but feel like I was watching someone else's story. This wasn't just about the company, it was about everything my family had put me through. The way they had overlooked me, the way they had pushed me aside. This was my moment to show them that I was not the person they had always tried to make me out to be. As the trial progressed, the stakes became clearer. The opposing counsel, my father's lawyer, made their first move, attacking the legitimacy of my purchase. They claimed I had misrepresented key financial aspects of the company, suggesting that my acquisition wasn't legitimate. It was their way of undermining my position, casting doubt on my integrity. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. Rachel and I had anticipated this move. We had documents that proved the financials were sound, that my purchase was legitimate, and that every step had been done above board. My lawyer countered their claims with confidence, tearing apart their argument piece by piece. The look on my father's face as he listened was priceless. He was starting to realise that I wasn't the naive child he had always believed I was. I was stronger, smarter, and more capable than he had ever given me credit for. I watched as my father's team faltered, trying to salvage their argument. But the damage had already been done. We had shown that their claims were baseless, that their attempt to regain control of the company was nothing more than a desperate attempt to manipulate the situation. I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. This was it. This was my victory. The courtroom was tense as the judge deliberated. My heart raced as I waited for the final decision. In that moment, I realised how far I had come. I had spent years being overlooked, but now I was finally standing up for myself. This was my moment to prove that I was worthy, not just of the company, but of the respect I had been denied for so long. The judge returned and the room went silent. The decision was made. The court ruled in my favour. We find that the sale of the company was legitimate, the judge said, her voice clear and firm. The claims made by the opposing party are unfounded. The ownership of the company remains with the plaintiff. I sat there in stunned silence for a moment, letting the words sink in. I had won. My family had tried to take everything from me, but I had fought back and I had emerged victorious. As the courtroom erupted into murmurs, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, triumph, but most of all, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Vindication.
For so long, I had been told that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't make it on my own. But now I had proven them wrong. Rachel turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "You did it," she whispered, a proud smile spreading across her face. I nodded slowly, my mind still processing everything that had just happened. I had fought for this. I had worked for this. And now the company, my future, was mine. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as I walked out, my victory still sinking in. It felt unreal, like I was floating through a dream. The legal battle had been fierce, but I had come out on top. The company, my company, was officially mine, and the court had backed me up. I had fought for this, and I had won. Yet, as I stepped outside into the brisk air, the weight of the situation wasn't as light as I expected. My phone buzzed in my pocket, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Daniel. "We need to talk. This isn't over." I stared at the message for a moment, my stomach sinking. The court battle may have been over, but I knew better than to think my family would just accept the outcome. They'd always believed they were entitled to the company. They weren't going to let me have it without a fight, even if they had lost in court. I texted back, "I'm not interested in more threats, Daniel. I've already won. Stay out of my way." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. I wasn't going to play their games anymore. I had fought too hard to let them manipulate me back into their control. Rachel caught up to me outside the courthouse, her expression a mix of relief and pride. "You did it," she said, grinning. "I knew you had it in you." I gave her a small smile, but couldn't shake the unease that lingered in my chest. "I don't think it's over yet." Rachel frowned, picking up on my tone. "You think they're going to try something else?" "Of course," I said, my voice steady but firm. "They won't let this go. They never wanted me to have the company in the first place. Losing the court case won't change that." Rachel nodded, her eyes narrowing in determination. "Then we need to be ready for whatever they throw at us next. We've got the law on our side, but we need to make sure they don't have any more tricks up their sleeves." The next few days were filled with tension, but nothing came. I expected my family to make a move, to try to do something underhanded to regain control. But nothing happened. It was almost as if they were waiting for me to slip up, to make a mistake they could capitalise on. I spent the next week focused on the company, its future, its growth, its potential. I met with executives, strategised with Rachel, and looked at ways to expand. Every decision I made felt like a step forward, like I was truly building something of my own. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family wasn't done with me. They had been trying to control my future for so long. They wouldn't give up that easily. Then, one evening, I received a call that changed everything. It was from my father. "Can we meet?" he asked, his voice calm but with an edge I couldn't place. "There's something important I need to discuss." I wasn't sure what to think. After everything, I wasn't sure I could trust him, but I knew I had to hear him out. If he was asking for a meeting, it wasn't just to apologise again. I had a feeling he was up to something. I agreed to meet him at a cafe in the city, a neutral ground where neither of us had the upper hand. When I arrived, he was already sitting at a table, his face drawn with exhaustion. He didn't look like the confident man I'd always known. He looked human, vulnerable. It was a side of him I wasn't used to seeing. "I'll get straight to it," my father said when I sat down, not wasting any time. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I realise now that I was wrong, that I've hurt you in ways I can never undo. But I also know that I can't just sit back and watch you run this company without any guidance. I still want to be involved." I stared at him, trying to process his words. "You want to be involved? After everything that's happened, now you want to offer guidance?" He sighed deeply, his hands folded on the table. "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but I need to. You've demonstrated that you're capable of running this company independently, but you've also shown me that you're alone in this. And that's something I don't want for you. You may have won the legal battle, but this is bigger than just business. This is about family. I want us to try again, this time as equals. I wanted to scream, to tell him that I didn't need his help, that I didn't need his approval. But something in his eyes made me pause. He wasn't offering control. He was offering reconciliation. For the first time in my life, it seemed like he was seeing me, not as the invisible daughter, not as the failure, but as someone capable of running her own life, her own future. I'm not asking you to give up control, he continued, his voice soft but firm. But I don't want to be shut out of your life completely. Can we try to work together? I was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. It wasn't the apology I had expected, but it was something I hadn't gotten in years. Respect. Let's try, I finally said, my voice steady. But no more manipulation, no more games. We'll do this on my terms, and if you respect that, we can work together. My father nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I respect that. I really do. The week following my meeting with my father felt like a strange in-between. I had agreed to his offer, but I wasn't sure what that meant yet. Was this a genuine change? Or was my father just trying to pull the strings again, one last time? As much as I tried to stay focused on the company, there was a constant question hanging over me. What was he really after? I could feel the tension building, and it wasn't just in the office. When I saw my siblings, they were quieter than usual, like they were still processing what had happened. My brothers and sisters, who had once seen me as nothing more than the black sheep, were suddenly acting like nothing had changed. They hadn't apologised, hadn't made any attempts to reach out, or even acknowledge the rift that had torn us apart. It was clear that their attitudes hadn't fully shifted. But my father, he was different. He was trying. I could see it in the way he started asking questions about the company, in the way he quietly watched me make decisions without interjecting. He wasn't taking over like I had feared, but he was there, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel completely alone. Still, I kept my guard up. I wasn't foolish enough to believe that everything had been fixed overnight. This wasn't just about business. It was about trust. It was about years of being dismissed and ignored, and now for the first time, I was in control. That didn't mean I was ready to hand over anything. I spent the next few days meeting with the executives, reorganising the company's strategy. The changes I had put in place were starting to show results. Profits were up, the company's reputation was growing, and I could see the future expanding. Everything I had worked so hard for was starting to pay off. But in the back of my mind, I knew that this success was fragile. My family still had power. They could still take it all away if I wasn't careful. Then came the unexpected call. It was from Daniel again. "We need to talk," he said, his voice tight, as though he was trying to remain calm. "Dad wants you to come to the estate. It's important." I felt a lump forming my throat. My father hadn't called me directly, which made me suspicious. After everything, was he about to throw me back into the fire again? "I don't know what you're up to, Daniel," I said, my voice steady but wary. "But I'm not coming back for another round of manipulation." "It's not like that," he insisted. "Please, just come. I think you'll want to hear this." I hesitated. Something about his voice was different, less defensive, more pleading. I didn't trust him, but I knew I had to go. If they were about to make another move, I needed to be prepared. When I arrived at the estate, it was quieter than usual. My father was sitting alone at the dining table, looking uncharacteristically sombre. There was no bravado in his posture, no sense of control. For once, he looked like the man who had lost everything, not the man who had always been in charge. I sat down across from him, waiting for him to speak first. It was then that he did something I wasn't expecting. He apologised again. "I'm sorry for everything," he said, his voice low, genuine. "For the way I treated you, for never believing in you the way I should have. I should have been there for you, But instead, I pushed you away. I've been a fool."
I stared at him, unsure how to respond. Could this really be happening? Could he really be admitting that he had been wrong about me all this time? It was almost too much to process. "You've shown me what it means to be truly strong," he continued, his eyes meeting mine. "You've built something incredible, and I've come to respect you in ways I never thought possible." I didn't say anything right away. The silence in the room felt heavy, but for the first time, it was the kind of silence that came with understanding, not tension. I had spent my life fighting for this moment, for the acknowledgement that I was worth something. And here it was, finally, from the man who had always made me feel like I wasn't enough. "I don't know what this means for the future," my father said quietly, "but I want to work with you. I want to be part of this company. On your terms, though. No more trying to control things. I'm here to support you." I took a deep breath. The weight of his words hung in the air, but I wasn't sure if I could trust him yet. Words were one thing, actions were another. "You're saying you want to be part of this company," I said slowly, "but not control it?" "Yes," he replied. "I understand now that the company is yours. I won't take that from you, but I want to be involved in a way that respects your vision." For the first time in my life, I believed him. "I'll consider it," I said, my voice steady but cautious. "But there's one condition." "What's that?" he asked, his brow furrowing. "No more undermining. No more games. I will not tolerate being treated like I'm not in charge." He nodded, a solemn look on his face. "I understand, and I respect that." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. We weren't there yet, but we were finally on the same page. The days after my meeting with my father felt different. The tension that had once seemed like a constant weight on my shoulders had eased, but not entirely. I had agreed to try working together, but something inside me warned that this might be the calm before the storm. After all, it wasn't in my father's nature to just let go and let someone else take the reins, especially not his own daughter. I couldn't afford to lower my guard, not yet. I spent the following weeks focusing on the company. We had a strong foundation, but there were still issues to resolve, systems to streamline, departments to strengthen, and employees to motivate. Every decision I made felt like it had more weight than before. It was no longer just about running a business. It was about proving to myself that I could lead without being controlled. I had built this company from the ground up, and now I needed to show everyone that I could continue to grow it, to make it thrive. But that meant balancing my own vision with the delicate peace I had struck with my father. Rachel stayed by my side, offering support, insight, and advice. She was the only one who had seen the whole picture, from the struggles to the victories, and she had helped me keep my head above water when everything felt overwhelming. I could always count on her, and with her by my side, I felt like I had a solid foundation to move forward. But then the unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I was finalising plans for the company's next big project, I received a call from Daniel. It was the last person I expected to hear from, especially given the way things had ended between us. "Hey, it's me." Daniel's voice came through the phone, sounding almost apologetic. "I know we haven't exactly seen eye to eye, but I wanted to talk. Can we meet?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to think. Was this another attempt to manipulate me? After everything we'd been through, could I trust him? "I don't know, Daniel," I said, my voice cautious. "Last time we met, it didn't go so well." "I know," he admitted, "but I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk, really talk. Please, just hear me out." I considered it for a moment. Maybe it was time to put the past behind us, at least for the sake of moving forward as a family, if that was even possible. "Okay, I'll meet you." We agreed to meet at a local cafe, a neutral ground where we could have a conversation without the heavy weight of the family estate hanging over us. When I arrived, Daniel was already sitting at a table, his posture stiff and his expression guarded.
He looked different, more worn out, maybe even a little vulnerable. For a moment, it felt like I was meeting a stranger. I sat down, my heart still unsure of what to expect. "What do you want to talk about?" Daniel took a deep breath, and for the first time he seemed genuinely nervous. "I want to apologise. I know I've been a part of the problem and I haven't treated you the way I should have. I've always been caught up in the business, in the legacy. I never saw you for who you really were." I was silent for a moment, unsure of how to react. I had always wanted to hear these words from him, but now that I had, I wasn't sure they meant as much as I thought they would. "It's a little late for that, don't you think?" I replied, my voice sharp. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself, trying to get you all to see me as more than just the other daughter. And now you want to apologise?"
Daniel nodded, his eyes sincere. "I understand that, and I know it's not enough to fix the past. But I want to try. I want us to have a real relationship, not based on the company or legacy, but on respect. And I want to help if you'll let me." I looked at him, weighing his words. He was right in front of me, offering something I hadn't expected. Maybe it was an apology I'd waited too long for, but it was an apology nonetheless. Was I ready to accept it? Could I let go of all the hurt I had carried for so many years? "I'm not saying everything will be fine, Daniel," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "But if you're serious about changing, then maybe there's a chance for us to try again. But it won't be easy. You can't expect me to forget everything that's happened." He nodded, his expression determined. "I know, but I'm willing to put in the work. For the family. For you." For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for things to heal between us. It wasn't going to be easy, and it certainly wasn't going to happen overnight, but the possibility was there, and that was all I needed. As we talked, the weight I had been carrying began to lift. Daniel and I didn't resolve everything in one conversation, but it felt like we had taken the first step toward rebuilding something real. We didn't have to agree on everything, but for once, I felt like we were finally on the same page. The days following my conversation with Daniel were quiet. A kind of uneasy calm settled over me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to breathe a little. The weight of the battle with my family, the legal fight, the years of rejection, didn't disappear overnight, but there was a shift, a slight change in the air that made everything feel a little more possible. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I felt like I was finally standing on my own 2 feet. Daniel had reached out, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely ready to make amends. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was the first real step in the right direction. And as hard as it was to admit, I couldn't deny the small part of me that wanted to believe that things could be different. With the court case behind me and my father's reluctant acknowledgement of my strength, I had the space to focus on the company. We were moving forward, growing, improving, and becoming something bigger than I ever imagined. The road ahead wasn't easy, but I was finally on my terms. It wasn't about what my family had expected of me. It wasn't about proving myself anymore. It was about the work. And for the first time, the work felt right. I spent a lot of time thinking about the future, about where I wanted to take the company and what kind of leader I wanted to be. I knew that if I was going to succeed, I had to do it on my own, with my vision leading the way. It wasn't about revenge. It was about showing the world and my family that I was capable of more than just being their daughter. I was capable of greatness in my own right. One evening, a few weeks after my meeting with Daniel, I received a call from my father. It was the first time he had reached out directly since the court case, and I wasn't sure what to expect. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hello? Can we talk? My father's voice came through the phone, still as commanding as ever. But this time, there was a softness to it, a sincerity I hadn't heard in years. "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "I've been thinking," he started, "and I want to tell you again that I'm proud of you. I know I've said it before, but I think it's important that you know I've seen what you've done. I've seen your strength, and I regret not seeing it sooner." His words caught me off guard. There was no manipulation, no conditions, just acknowledgement. I had fought for this, and now I was finally hearing it. My father wasn't perfect, and I knew there was still work to be done. But this was a start, a real start. "Thank you," I said quietly. "It means more than you know." "I know we can't change the past," he continued, his voice steady. "But I want to make things right moving forward. I want to be part of this company, but this time I'll respect your leadership. I'll support you in whatever way you need." I felt a lump form in my throat. I had spent so long hoping for this moment, and now that it was here, it felt almost unreal. My father was offering something I had always wanted: respect. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't unconditional, but it was real. And that, for me, was enough. "I appreciate that," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm not asking for everything to be perfect, but if we're going to move forward, we have to do it on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more games." "I understand," he said, and for the first time in my life, I believed him. "No more games. I'm done with that. I'm proud of you. You've proven me wrong, and I respect that." I let out a breath I didn't realise I had been holding. This was the moment I had dreamed about for years, the moment when my father finally saw me, truly saw me for who I was, not as the daughter trying to live up to his expectations, but as a person who had built something incredible on her own. We didn't talk much longer, but as I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't the resolution I had expected. It wasn't the fairy tale ending where everything was suddenly perfect, but it was enough. My father had acknowledged me. My family had acknowledged me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that whatever came next, I was ready. I had my own company, my own vision, and the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As I sat there, reflecting on everything that had led me to this moment, I realised that my victory wasn't just in winning the company. It wasn't just in proving my worth to my father or to my family. It was in finally standing up for myself, in no longer letting their expectations define me. And for the first time, I felt like I had finally found my place in this world. The calm after the storm was finally here. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, but there was no sense of finality. I had spent so many years battling for respect, for acknowledgement, for my place in this world, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to truly relax. But as the weeks passed, the tension in my body slowly melted away. The company was thriving, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly earned my success. Rachel and I worked tirelessly, building the business and expanding it in ways I hadn't even imagined. We had turned the company into a force to be reckoned with, and the changes I had implemented were paying off. Sales were up, and the future looked bright. But more than that, I had gained something I hadn't even realised I was missing. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that you've finally proven yourself. Yet, even with everything going well, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go of the past. I had spent so long fighting for my place in my father's world, fighting for his approval, that I wasn't sure what to do now that I had it. What did it mean to finally be seen by the man who had always overlooked me? Did his apology mean anything?
Or was it just another way for him to maintain control? I had spent years searching for validation, but now that I had it, I realised something important. I didn't need it anymore. The victory wasn't just about the company, it was about me. I had built something on my own. I had fought for what was mine. I had earned my place in this world, not because someone had handed it to me, but because I had taken it. I was sitting in my office one afternoon when the phone rang. It was from my father.
"Can we meet?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "I think it's time we talk about the future." My stomach clenched at the thought. Was this another attempt to regain control? Another round of manipulation? I had grown tired of these games. But there was something in his tone that made me hesitate. He wasn't demanding. He wasn't trying to assert dominance. It was almost like he genuinely wanted to talk. I agreed to meet him at a local cafe. This time, I wasn't going in expecting an apology, expecting any kind of grand gesture. I was going in because I had earned the right to make my own choices, and I wasn't going to let my father or anyone else dictate how my future played out. When I arrived, he was sitting at a small table in the corner. For a moment, he looked just like he had during all those years when I was the invisible daughter. Strong, imposing, but with a quiet sadness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. It wasn't the look of the father I'd known. It was a man who had realised his mistakes but didn't know how to fix them. "Sit down," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. I sat down, looking at him carefully. This wasn't the man who had tried to control me, the man who had dismissed my abilities. This was someone else, someone who had, for the first time, come to terms with what he had done. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he said, meeting my gaze. "About you, about us. I've always treated you like you didn't belong, like you didn't deserve to be part of this company, and I regret it. I regret that I couldn't see you for who you truly were. But I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of everything you've built. You've proven me wrong in ways I didn't think were possible." I wasn't sure what to say. All my life I had wanted to hear these words from him, but now that they were here, I wasn't sure if I could accept them. There was so much history between us, so much pain. Could I really forgive him for all those years of feeling like I wasn't enough? "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm asking for a chance to be part of your life. Not as your father, but as someone who respects you. I want to help in whatever way I can, but only if you want me to." I sat back in my chair, processing his words. The anger I'd carried for so long was still there, buried deep inside me. But now it wasn't just about the company. It wasn't about getting my father's approval anymore. It was about me, about the journey I had gone through to get here. And I realised as I sat there that I wasn't the same person I had been when this all started. "I don't need your help," I said quietly. "Not in the way you think. But I'm willing to work with you. If you really respect me, if you really believe in what I've done, then we can work together, but only on my terms." He nodded, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, understanding. "I can accept that," he said softly. And just like that, everything changed. This wasn't about control anymore. It was about respect. It was about understanding. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly won.